Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Eddie Liger Power Hour. We've got a super chat from Ross before the stream even started. That's incredible how fast this guy is on top of it with the super chats. Thank you, Ross. We've got a great stream plan today. Going to talk about a little bit of RFK news and how RFK is being received by the mainstream media and by CNN. I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to people who are familiar with how CNN operates. We're going to talk about the cocaine being found in the White House, who it could belong to. Is it Hunter Biden's? Some people have been speculating on that. So very interesting, though, that cocaine was found in the White House, where Joe Biden, one of the architects of the war on drugs, or at least worsening, ratcheting up the war on drugs, where he's the president. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Greta Thunberg visiting President Zelensky in Ukraine. Talk about the UPS workers gearing up for a strike. Some updates on the war in Ukraine that we talked about in the last stream as well. So yeah, it's going to be a great show. We'll get right into it after the intro. All right. So apparently, based on what I'm reading in the chat here, people aren't aware of this, but yeah, there was some cocaine that was found in the West Wing. It's found in the White House, and a White House official said it cannot be ruled out that this cocaine belonged to Hunter Biden. So some people have speculated that, in fact, the White House does know who it belonged to. They just don't want to release it because they're trying to find a story right now that makes it look good. Unfortunately, most of my sources on this are from Fox News. But every once in a while, Fox News says something that's true when they're trying to attack the Democrats. So shout out to them for that, I guess. But yeah, we'll watch this clip here to catch people up on what's going on with the White House cocaine situation.
The press is starting to lose patience with the lack of concrete information coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Listen to this.
It was found, by my observation, in a much more secure place, limited access place than that West Wing reception area. It's still a frequently trafficked place, but it's down near the Situation Room. Normal people, average people, just can't get in there, even with the entry from the Northwest Gate.
It is a high traffic area, and by that I mean you do have people who work here in all kinds of jobs. The fact that it's close to the Situation Room is certainly notable.
All right, let's bring in Tammy Bruce, Fox News contributor. Tammy, I worked there for 4 years.
It's notable that these are the people who are perpetrating the war on drugs. Like these are the people running our country, and our country has more people locked in jail per capita than any other country on earth. And a lot of them are nonviolent drug offenses. So we have a militarized police force that's keeping the prisons filled with bodies at the behest of the prison industrial complex that's making a lot of money on this, and making a lot of money on the cheap labor of the prisoners because you don't have to pay prison labor minimum wage. So a lot of the prisoners are doing labor for like 30 cents an hour, and a lot of companies are making money off this. So they lobby the government to harshen or ratchet up drug laws, militarize the police, and keep the prisons filled with bodies. So America has like 22 to 24% of the world's prison population, but only like 4% of the world's population. Some hugely disproportionate number of prisoners to civilians. So the fact that they're doing drugs in the White House, the fact that the people who run our country are doing cocaine is extremely hypocritical. And that's why, I mean, it's hypocritical and worth talking about that Hunter Biden has a long history, you know, with drug abuse and with getting away with it for years and years and years, getting away with it, while Joe Biden is on the Senate floor arguing for harsher sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, calling them super predators and whatnot. The only super predators are the Biden family.
At the NSC, right? I was in the Situation Room every working day of my life for those 4 years. I know this area like the back of my hand. You walk through 2 sets of double doors off of West Executive Avenue. On your right-hand side is a box where you put your phones. It's at a guard desk right before you enter the Situation Room. You need access to get in there. The only people who are putting their phones in there are people who are cleared to go into the Situation Room. That means we're looking at West Wing staff, some West Wing staff, not even all of them, the entire National Security Council, a couple hundred folks, staff who work inside the Situation Room, a couple of dozen of them, plus the people who visit who are also pre-cleared and have security clearances from the departments and agencies.
Right.
It is a heavily trafficked area of the White House, that is true, but hardly anybody is using those phone boxes.
Right.
It's only folks who are going inside the Situation Room. It looks like an insider problem.
Right, and as some guests would go through there as well, as I did at one point. So but you are either invited or approved by the executive office. So it's interesting how legacy media is moving along this highly trafficked idea put forth by Ms. Jean-Pierre. And the fact is, though, that these are people who
yeah. So the second video we'll look at is Karine Jean-Pierre, but she tried to deflect from this and imply that it couldn't have come from within the White House. It was probably dropped by a guest or some low-level staffer or whatever. When in fact, as they're explaining here, that's not really the case.
have influence on the
this for just a little bit longer here.
president, have influence on national security, are relied upon.
There's a double standard against drugs in the U.S., especially Wall Street. It's seen as performance enhancing and can be prescribed by doctors for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of confusion with how drugs are seen in this country and how they're scheduled based on various influences. Like I said, you have the prison industrial complex lobbying to ratchet up harsher drug sentences and militarize the police and keep the prisons filled with bodies. And then you also have like the pharmaceutical lobby that wants to keep opioids legal and wants doctors to prescribe more and more opioids or amphetamines, and these aren't necessarily seen as drugs. They're seen as performance enhancing or as prescribed. Even though now we have millions of people addicted to opioids and they've killed hundreds of thousands of people because the pharmaceutical lobby is able to influence Washington. They remain legal and they are looked at differently than black market street drugs, which is, most people who die from opioid abuse start with the pharmaceuticals, and then they run out of money for that, and they end up taking black market street drugs.
To make decisions in that are life and death decisions often. And for those who've done cocaine, understand that while it certainly, yes, is less deadly, I suppose, than anthrax, which might look the same, the fact.
This is the best comment. Shouldn't Hunter Biden be preoccupied fighting forest fires for $145 per day in an orange jumpsuit? Yeah, this is everything that I've discussed here with this story wrapped into one comment. Like one of the jobs that they have prisoners do a lot of the time is dangerous jobs like fighting forest fires. That's what they were doing in California recently for $1.45 per day. And a lot of these guys are nonviolent drug offenders, people born into poverty that got wrapped up in a bad lifestyle or whatever, and got locked in jail by these harsh drug laws that are aimed more at punishment and aim more at making money than they are at rehabilitation, perpetrated literally by Joe Biden, while his son Hunter Biden is collecting millions of dollars because he's owns shares in Ukrainian gas firms or sitting on the board of Ukrainian gas firms just because he's Joe Biden's son, and doing crack cocaine and getting away with it.
Fact is that it creates paranoia, it creates suspicion, it certainly creates aggression. It's extremely, every drug is dangerous. I did my share in my late teens and early 20s. It's something I regret now, seriously, but this is a remarkably shocking story. It's a dangerous story, and the American people, I think, understand this. It could be anyone, but I would add that the Hunter Biden issue makes it even more difficult for the White House to properly address this publicly, because they maybe don't know. That is now an element beyond the scandal of it for the family. It now is.
Yeah, so I think we've gotten everything we can from this. Let's watch the response from Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, who unfortunately, again, bad sources to start the show with. But it's another Fox News clip, and this time it's from Piers Morgan, who, you know, generally I'm not a fan of at all, but his coverage here was interesting. It's the same thing with the other Fox News shows. Like, sometimes when they're criticizing the Democrats, they accidentally say stuff that's true.
Welcome back to Fox News Tonight. Now, it's not called the White House for nothing, much as they'd like it to go away. Cocaine-gate remains.
Since when has Piers Morgan had a show with Fox? I thought he was just on British television. When did he join the Fox News crew? I mean, it makes sense. It's a match made in hell.
For nothing, much as they'd like it to go away, Cocaine-gate remains a major scandal and arguably my favorite story of the year. Whose coke was it? Biden's main flat won't even say whether it belongs to the president or his son Hunter.
There has been some irresponsible reporting about the family, and so I got to call that out here. And I have been very clear. I was clear 2 days ago when talking about this over and over again as I was being asked the question. As you know, and media outlets reported this, the Biden family was not here. They were not here. They were at Camp David.
She is the most condescending, arrogant human being I think I've ever seen. I don't know if this is... I feel like her press statements make people dislike the Biden administration more. Because I don't know what maybe they look at it like she's slaying those reporters asking tough questions of the president, but she's always lying. She's always lying and just, digging her heels in and doing anything to defend the Democratic Party and the administration.
They were not here Friday.
Which I guess is her job, but...
Here Saturday, they were not here Sunday, they were not even here Monday. They came back on Tuesday. So to ask that question is actually incredibly irresponsible. And
it's always a lecture, dude. It sounds like you're in a damn HR meeting. Actually, to ask such a question is incredibly irresponsible. Okay. You're not supposed to criticize the president of the United States in a democracy, okay? So this is extremely irresponsible, okay? It wasn't irresponsible for Joe Biden to ratchet up the drug war and call black people super predators in the 2000s and argue for harsher sentences for nonviolent drug offenders. Okay, that was not irresponsible, but however, it is highly irresponsible to criticize the Biden administration for having cocaine in the White House or to criticize Hunter Biden for doing cocaine for 20 years or to try to connect these issues. It's highly irresponsible, actually. Okay.
I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I would leave it there too, because let's get into irresponsibility, shall we? Maybe the media wouldn't have had to have asked if the administration had just revealed who the cocaine belonged to. And for the record, this may come as news to the White House press secretary, the Biden family was at the White House.
Asking questions is bad, okay? Mr. Garrison, okay?
On that Friday, the president departed to Camp David with his wife, Jill and Hunter, that evening. So she was telling a bit of a whopper, wasn't she, from the podium? Well, nobody at the White House has been able to explain why the investigation is taking so long. It's the most secure building on the planet, supposedly. Fox News has learned the FBI is still investigating the scene of the crime. Is there any doubt, though, that if this was anthrax and not cocaine, we would have known who the culprit was in about 3 microseconds? Well, Monica Crowley is the former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury and joins me now. Well, what a drama we have here, Monica.
Hi, Piers.
All the Fox News hosts look like clones, dude. They all look like the same people.
On one level, it's a hilarious story because
like Piers Morgan is just a few, like if you were creating an old white Fox News host in a video game in a character maker, him and Stuart Varney are just a few settings away from each other.
what is cocaine doing in the middle of the most secure
Just Laura Ingraham with like poofier hair.
building in the world? Secondly, quite serious though, because if cocaine can be brought in like that, I mean, I've been to the White House several times. It's like getting into Fort Knox.
Yes.
How did it get in there, and who brought it in there? And more importantly, why is the place as crawling in? Secret Service, FBI, you name it, they're there, the best security people in the world. How have they still not found out who it was?
So I think they do know who it was, and they're trying to figure out a way how to navigate this crisis, right?
Can it actually be Hunter Biden?
Well, we don't know for sure.
I mean, he's suspect number one.
Well, of course, because Hunter Biden and cocaine have had a long, intimate relationship over many.
Who was the White House aide or secretary or whatever who said we can't rule out that it was Hunter Biden? Someone said that, and then that made all the headlines, right? And I think that's probably what Karine Jean-Pierre was saying was the irresponsible reporting or whatever. But I do wonder who the aide was that said we can't rule out it was Hunter Biden. Maybe they literally know it was his. Who knows? I mean, they've got to have cameras all over the place, right? And they've got to have security guards pretty much watching those cameras 24/7. Like, I don't know. There's a good chance they could figure it out. Also, Snoop Dogg admitted to, I don't know what I'm allowed to say without getting banned, but I think I can say he said he smoked in the White House bathroom and got away with it. So Snoop Dogg 1, Hunter Biden 0.
Decades. In fact, Hunter Biden got thrown out of the U.S. Navy for cocaine possession. This goes way back. We don't know who it belongs to, but the White House is a fortress. You and I have been through that entrance many times. Those counter-espionage cubicles where you have to store your devices, the Marines are right there. And by the way, from the second you enter the White House campus, you are being watched. Surveillance cameras, Secret Service watching you in real time. So I think it's pretty clear they know exactly who did this. And I think if it weren't Hunter or anybody in the Biden family or a senior Biden administration official, we would know the name by now. It takes about 5 minutes to track this down.
No question. So,
that's just so dumb. Like, dude, it's literally like the movie Idiocracy. You have the president who is one of the architects of the drug war, and they find cocaine in the White House, and he's trying to lie about it and obfuscate. And his son has been doing drugs for years and years and years and years and just getting richer by doing nothing and never being held accountable. And there are more people in prison in this country than any other country on earth by far. Well over 20% of the world's prison population because of people like Joe Biden. And there's cocaine, a hard drug, in the White House. It's not even like he was taking a few one-hitters every day before he goes to sleep or something. No, cocaine, a hard drug.
obviously, they're not telling the full story. But I thought the arrogance from that press secretary to talk about irresponsible media and then to look down the barrel of the cameras and say they were not there on the Friday.
They fired aides for weed usage. Right. The insane levels of hypocrisy. Yeah, even though they're all Schedule 1 drugs, technically.
When she must have known they were there on the Friday until the evening.
Well, of course, but this press secretary, like her boss, the president, and everybody else in this administration, peers, are serial liars. I mean, every single day, they are just spewing mistruths and obscuring the facts to suit their own agenda. And because they have the protection of the propaganda press, they get away with it. So they can just issue these lies and know that there will be no accountability.
Well, can you imagine what would have happened if this had happened in the Trump White House? Can you imagine the media feeding frenzy that would have gone on from all the media that are currently, from where I'm looking, being very quiet about this? It's almost like...
True. It's ridiculous. What's that Noam Chomsky quote? Any dictator in history would envy the subservience of the American media. It's just a complete lapdog media. And, you know, they don't want Trump. You can say what you want about Trump. I have a million criticisms of Trump. I don't trust him, even when he says he's going to, like, pull out of NATO and, you know, or pull back from the war in Ukraine. because he gave a lot of anti-imperialist rhetoric in 2016, didn't follow through on a lot of it, and you're limited in what you can do from the executive branch, especially when you have a State Department and a Department of Defense that's completely stacked from top to bottom with Clintonites, with neocons and neoliberals. Trump tried to pull out a lot of troops right before he got out of office last time he was president, and the Pentagon and DOD just said, nope, not going to do that. Basically just shut him down. And, it'd be very hard to do anything. However, the media is not in his favor. They've turned against him, and they'll do anything to defend the ridiculous Biden-Harris administration, the hypocritical Biden-Harris administration, corporate, corrupt, incompetent Biden-Harris administration. And it's gotten us to this ridiculous point where, like Piers Morgan said, if this happened to the Trump administration, they would be all over it. There would be 24/7 coverage about, whose cocaine is this and how does Russia somehow connected to it? How did Putin somehow put it in there? But when it's the Biden administration, there's almost complete silence. So that was just a funny story. I bet it wasn't even good stuff. That's funny. Remember when Trump had a drawer full of Sudafed? Yeah, I think Trump does like Adderall for sure. Probably does stimulants. I don't know what they use to keep Joe Biden awake. Apparently it doesn't work that well, but all right, that was a pretty funny story. What's this, Jacob? Okay, I'll add that to the list of stuff to watch. One sec. So pretty funny story. We'll get into the more serious stuff next. But I had to cover that. The hypocrisy is so obvious.
I know it's an unpopular,
and it's just another ridiculous story in the legacy of the Biden-Harris administration, cocaine in the White House. All right, let's go to, I said we were done with the funny stories and going to the serious stuff, but this one's a little funny as well. Slightly more serious because it has to do with Ukraine, Russia, the most pivotal conflict in the world right now, a proxy conflict between Russia and NATO, the Western powers and the rising Eastern powers like Russia, China, Iran, who also have alliances with countries like Venezuela and Cuba in the West. But either way, it also has to do with Greta Thunberg, climate change activist, someone heralded as the leader of the young generation of climate activists and leftists who are going to change the world, who apparently has fallen completely into opportunism and is now just acting as a neoliberal spokesperson, a neoliberal mouthpiece, and showed up at this summit in Kiev to give support to Zelensky and the U.S. puppet regime in Ukraine and Kiev that's doing everything they can to further this conflict, and who are saying repeatedly that they won't sign a peace deal unless they can get Crimea and the Donbass back, which is just not going to happen at this point. So continually dodging a peace agreement, causing more Ukrainians to die, causing more Russians to die. That's the kind of thing that Greta Thunberg is now supporting. So yeah, sad to see a young potential leader co-opted by neoliberalism, but that's the nature of opportunism in the capitalist system.
Here's another indication of how badly things are going for Ukraine, that they felt compelled to do this.
It's very important to have this united decision about this compact of democratic steps.
Yes, they brought in Greta Thunberg. That's how badly things are going for
they're like, well, we're not getting the ATACMS, so we'll bring in the Thunberg. I mean, what does Greta Thunberg have to do with this?
She's there to argue that cluster bombs are environmentally friendly. These are biodegradable cluster bombs we just gave Ukraine.
What does this have to do with climate change?
I mean,
Nothing.
yeah, I mean, like you'd think if that was her concern, she could speak out against the bombing of the Nord Stream pipelines, right? That, as far as I understand, was not very good for the planet, but nothing there. I just, you know, I wasn't one of the, like, I avoided the whole Greta Thunberg thing because I just, like, whatever. But so many people promoted her as the answer to climate change and championed her as this hero. And now she's like going and like meeting with Zelensky. And also, if you read some statements she made, it was like a carbon copy of a State Department press release, literally in terms of like the verbiage, like something about Russia's unprovoked criminal invasion of Ukraine. It was like literally what she said.
I don't think it started this way. I think she was, you know, probably genuinely a young person concerned about climate change who went viral, who was pretty intelligent, you know, and went viral giving a speech about the need to do something about this and the need to combat ecological degradation. But then she just, you know, was young and got co-opted by neoliberals, fell into opportunism. You know, she's probably making an insane amount of money now, never has to work again, just has to be shuttled around and do these speaking engagements and, you know, travel around the world and meet with people like Zelensky. And, you know, she probably doesn't have a really deep theoretical understanding of the world, which, you know, is why you need theory to not fall into opportunism, and you need discipline and fortitude to not fall into opportunism. But Greta Thunberg apparently had none of that, or she was too young to get a chance to develop it too. You know, she was pretty freaking young when she got famous, you know. Didn't she make a really blatant condemnation of capitalism's role in climate change? She used to do stuff like that all the time. You know, that's what I mean. I don't think she started as like a psyop or anything. I think she probably was someone who legitimately captured a lot of attention by, in that speech, capturing the fear of a lot of young people, the climate anxiety that a lot of young people feel about the ecological degradation that's going on under capitalism. But neoliberals are really good at capturing leaders and turning them against us.
Whatever she said was taken exactly from the State Department. So whoever called her out as like a fraud.
Why would a leader meet with a young climate activist in the middle of a military conflict? Just seems weird and not even good as a PR stunt. For sure. Especially when we know that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, like Aaron Mate said there, which released all this methane gas into the ocean, was obviously, you know, not an environmentally friendly thing to do. And when the U.S. just sent cluster bombs to Ukraine, and, you know, that brings up the memory of the U.S. cluster bombing the crap and dropping a bunch of Agent Orange and napalm on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Where in Laos, you know, millions of those bombs didn't even explode, and they're still there today, still in the soil. And there's been a ton of ecological degradation in those countries. You know, to this day, they suffer because of the bombing campaigns of the U.S. And you have a similar story in Korea. And now we're sending those same cluster bombs to Ukraine. But they want Zelensky to meet with, you know, the climate change activist as a PR stunt, so he can believe that Ukraine is fighting against ecological degradation when they're just privatizing their whole economy. They're literally just handing over their whole economy to Western multinationals and finance capital, as if that's gonna do anything to combat climate change. You know, those are the people destroying the environment. Devastated to hear AOC endorse Biden again. Yes, devastated. I wasn't devastated, I guess. I wasn't surprised. Another example of an opportunist, you know, somebody co-opted by neoliberalism, who at one point was a leader of a lot of revolutionary-minded people. But I don't know. I don't believe Greta Thunberg started as a psyop. AOC has some sketchy stuff in her background. She may have been one of the neo-libs from the beginning, but who's to say? Thank you so much for the super chat, Sam.
And even as an op, I mean, I got to say, they're looking pretty good right now.
Well, Cory Morningstar did the first really thorough takedown of Greta Thunberg, showing how her school strike was sponsored.
We talked about Laos the other day, the most bombed country in the world, and a Marxist-Leninist socialist country to this day. And their foreign ministry apparently released a condemnation of the cluster bombs, which is fantastic to hear. Shout out to the government and the people of Laos for condemning what should be a war crime.
By a startup firm run by a Swedish entrepreneur who is heavily invested in renewable technology, which is put forward as the answer to climate change. And then from there, she was supported by every major foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which also supports Naomi Klein, who was there to host her for a talk when she came over on her messianic voyage on a supposedly carbon-free ship that was pedaled by like hamster wheels. No one talked about how she got home. But I'd never heard of this child before, and she was said to have superpowers that rendered her, first of all, above criticism, but also capable of divining the truth, a kind of Joan of Arc figure, because she was autistic or had Asperger's. I think that's what it was. And I mean, no offense to people who have autism or who are children, but being a child or having autism doesn't render you beyond critique if you are being used by powerful institutions run by very wealthy adults. And now we see that Greta Thunberg is fulfilling the most severe critiques of her critics and opponents, including from the right wing, which is that she's just a psyop, because she's going to Ukraine, which, according to the official story now in US media, is responsible for one of the worst attacks on the ozone layer in human history, with a massive release of methane gas from the Nord Stream pipelines. I mean, if you believe that Ukraine was responsible for that, as the Washington Post is reporting, then you should kind of be upset. You should ask some questions of Zelensky. Then,
as Jacob says, if Greta did care about the climate and the conflict in Ukraine, she would have argued for a peace settlement to stop the bombs from destroying the ecology of the region, instead of meeting and shilling for Zelensky. Absolutely. And as we'll see with the video, another video that I want to play, Zelensky was recently interviewed, and he's still, pushing this idea that the war can't end until Ukraine reclaims what he calls all of the occupied territories, which of course means the Donbass regions like Donetsk and Lugansk and Crimea, who voted for their independence or to join Russia, who don't want to be a part of Ukraine anymore. Crimea never wanted to be part of Ukraine. In 1991, they voted to become independent after the Soviet Union collapsed, but were still given to Ukraine. And of course, the people in the Donbass republics voted for their independence as well, because they'd been attacked and shelled by far right-wing militias in Ukraine, as well as the Ukrainian military, for years and years. So they're trying to undemocratically claim these places, basically, and perpetuating the conflict by saying, we're not going to end the conflict until you hand us over the Donbass republics and Crimea, who don't want to be a part of Ukraine. So it's insane. Zelensky's arguing for an endless forever war, basically, and essentially forcing the Russians' hand. Like, I don't know what they're going to be able to do other than regime change at a certain point, and actually going into Kiev and getting rid of him. But either way, as we were saying with the last video, if Greta Thunberg really cared about ecological devastation in Ukraine, she would say, sign a peace agreement. She would say, understand, that you're not getting the Donbass back, you're not getting Crimea back, sign a peace agreement, end the bloodshed.
This week that 80% of the people in this country have a family member or a friend who has died or been injured. And of each of those people, they each know 7 people who have died or been injured. This is truly incomprehensible trauma for many around the world to even comprehend, Mr. President. How do you help people? Because they tell us they look to you, that you represent for them these values of freedom and democracy that they're fighting for. How do you help them bear this terrible burden of loss?
They're not fighting for freedom and democracy when the places you're fighting for don't want to be a part of your country. When they democratically voted to not be a part of your country, in the case of Crimea, multiple times.
100% ліків немає. We don't have 100% efficient medicine in this situation. And when we are looking for a
The person they got to translate for Zelensky sounds nothing like him. Zelensky's like, it's like, the medicine that we're getting. It's not that bad, but
medicine or support for people in order to somehow find a substitution for their loss, I think this is all just a lie. Because when you lost your near and dear, what could substitute your loss? Warm words, money, some support, maybe a psychological one? All of this still cannot patch up that hole in the middle of a person. Nobody will substitute the love that Putin and his army took away. So you can just be near them and with those people, fight, and definitely do not forgive those who took all of this away, despite the fact that we don't have a coordinated plan on the tribunal in the world. But you yourself have to know that those people need justice. If we won't find justice for all these murderers later on, justice for Ukraine through the sentences for all these murderers, this space inside people will be filled with hatred and revenge.
So you hear that? This guy who's perpetuating the conflict and getting more and more and more people killed is telling the Ukrainian people to let the sadness in their heart about their dead loved ones and about the destruction of their country turn to hatred and rage towards Putin. Turn to hatred and rage so we can keep fueling a forever war and keep having people killed as puppets or proxies of NATO, rather than signing a peace agreement and ending the bloodshed. And it's just insane. This guy's nothing but a NATO actor trying to encourage forever war, even though it might ultimately end in his demise. But the U.S. doesn't care. Once they're done using their puppet, they don't care. And look at this, this empty-headed reporter just nodding her head the whole time. No pushback.
Is there ever forgiveness for the Ukrainians who were in occupied territory, who may have collaborated or may have gone along with the Russians, and maybe they'll say they felt they had no choice? But to unite Ukraine, will there be forgiveness?
Складніше всього буде в суспільстві, тому що
The most difficult situation will be happening in the society because you need time for everything. Sometimes time heals. And as I mentioned, the justice heals too. I'm convinced, but the sentences should be happening. People should know if you were a murderer and was fighting against Ukraine, you will be sentenced.
Here's the thing, though. You're not just sentencing murderers who switch sides and fight for Russia. You're sentencing anybody who supports the special military operation or anybody who criticizes NATO or the Zelensky regime. You've shuttered all opposition parties and opposition media, consolidated them into one pro-regime media outlet or series of media outlets, and you've banned, jailed, or exiled any political leaders or opposition figures who are critical of you. The Kononovich brothers are being threatened with assassination by the head of the Ukrainian police force, and they've been locked on house arrest for months for the crime of being communist and being critical of the Ukrainian government, and them, say, allowing Nazis to join the actual Ukrainian military, which they did when the Azov Battalion became part of Ukraine's National Guard following the Maidan coup.
Even if you were made by force to kill Ukrainians, you will be answering for your deeds. Nobody will forgive you, and you won't be able to explain all of this.
This is so sick because you know he's talking about anybody who's criticizing him. Anybody who's fighting the information war against NATO and Ukraine.
However,
locked up by the Ukrainian SBU police forces.
Those who were under occupation and were not fighting on the side of the enemy, they are Ukrainians. In any case, time will answer those questions, and so will our law enforcement agencies. We have our Interior Minister.
Yeah, I'm sure the law enforcement will, buddy.
Which is working now.
Yeah, dictator, you NATO puppet dictator.
On the security platform for the temporary occupied territories.
They've
there will
also
be answers.
Murdered a few. They murdered a lot, actually. They murdered like over a dozen at least. Not to mention all the people killed in the sniper attacks during the Maidan protests, or the people burned alive in the trade union building in Odessa.
To this question too.
You know, you live every day knowing in a very tangible way, you and many other Ukrainians, that you may die in a very tangible way. In the first few weeks of the war, Ukrainian intelligence said that you had survived a dozen assassination attempts, and who knows since then, right? It's not something to even track. But how does knowing that you are, as many say, one of the top targets in this world for death, how does that impact how you live, Mr. President?
Wonder how accurate those statistics are for sure.
Ну, я думаю, якщо чесно,
I'll be honest with you and tell you I've decided if I will be thinking about it constantly, I will just shut myself down. Very much like Putin now, who doesn't leave his bunker. If I will isolate myself, I won't understand what's going on.
I don't get why they keep saying that. There's videos of Putin, shaking hands with Xi Jinping and walking around and visiting different places in Russia and Moscow. Why do they always say he doesn't leave his bunker? At least he doesn't have a $1 million mansion in Miami like Zelensky.
Around me in the country. I will lose the connection with society. And if I lose this connection, I would lose the society. I'm convinced that society has to see if they are at risk, their president is at risk too, together with them. Of course, they understand that I have protection, etc., but I have to be on the same side with my people. You know you can get yourself into a cage like an animal and chain yourself there constantly, thinking that you are just about to get killed. Of course, my bodyguards should think of how to prevent this from happening. And this is their task. I don't think about it. Clearly, those sabotage groups might be back again and try to get rid of me. In all wars, they wanted to get rid of leaders of thoughts, leaders of countries, all sorts of motivators. So I leave this to the professionals, and I will free my mind to resolve the strategic issues.
I met with an infantry soldier named Vlad the other day. He was a history teacher before the war. He's fighting now on the front line near Zaporizhia. And he has not seen his wife or his children in a year. But he said it's okay. He's waiting for victory. He was fine to wait, but it's been a year.
So I talked to this one soldier, and he said we need to keep fighting till we have victory. He said no peace agreements. I'm totally okay with dying. Let's just keep fighting the war until we get back to Donbass and Crimea, even though they voted not to be a part of Ukraine. This one guy named Vlad said it's okay, says the reporter. So let's keep the war going forever. Yeah, our media, our lapdog media. I mean, this is what you would expect of the bourgeois media, though. This is why Marxist theory is important, right? We understand that the media is controlled by the capitalist class, the imperialist class, the class that profits from imperialism and from selling weapons. They have heavy control of the media through their wealth and ownership and connections. So it should come as no surprise to a Marxist that the media is trying to perpetuate the war in Ukraine, keep it going, turn Ukraine into what Zelensky said, a big Israel.
And when you talk about needing Biden to say something now, I wonder, Mr. President, how long can your troops keep fighting like they are now?
It depends on some things which we both understand. It depends on support with weapons from our partners. Depends on financial support, but any kind of support with energy supplies, sanctions, yet it all depends on the...
President Zelensky, how do you remain in such good shape, even though you're worried about the war? President Zelensky, how is your hair always done so nice? You always have such a good haircut and you're so handsome, even though there's a war going on. Even though you're pushing your own countrymen into their death at the behest of NATO. You're so great.
Moral obligations and political decisions and political will of our partners. The Ukrainian motivation will not diminish. What can we lose? We can lose everything. What can we gain? We can gain victory. What is our victory? It means returning everything of our own. That's why we don't have it any other way.
Don't have it any other way. Give us everything of our own. Even though 90% of the people there don't want to be a part of this country, we're taking it back by force. Like this insanity.
Can we lose our motivation when willing to survive? We defend our common values, democracy and freedom, But in our case, freedom and democracy are not just words. In our case, this is our life. We are in Odessa now, and if we won't defend our coastline, the Russians will be here tomorrow, and we won't have our sea. If we won't have our sea, we won't have any logistical way to sell and grow our crops. So we will be losing our country. So we are fighting in order not to be a desert.
I know when I talk about Vlad not seeing his children, I know that you aren't, as president, you're not able to live with your own children, like so many of your soldiers on the front lines. Mr. President, when people see you, they see maybe a loneliness that so many here feel.
Oh my God. It reminds me of this chapter in parentheses, Black Shirts and Reds. It's called like We Must Adore Václav Havel, I think was the guy's name. And it was some playwright that the U.S. was backing up or propping up in, you know, a former Soviet country in East Europe. I can't remember where, but he said basically it was this like handsome younger guy, and he was just propped up by the media as this hero of freedom and democracy, even though his regime was banning opposition media, banned communism as an ideology in any left-wing media, increased the security forces, privatized the whole economy, sold it off to the West and the U.S., and suppressed protesters and organized working class bodies that tried to do anything about it. Very similar to Zelensky, but they just try to create a cult of personality among the American public and prop these people up as heroes. And I don't think it's working that well with Zelensky. I don't see a lot of people anymore who really think he's this heroic guy fighting for his country and being separated from his family in order to fight for freedom and democracy and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the way the media sucks him off and tries to prop him up as this like movie protagonist style hero is just insanity and hard to watch.
You feel too that you are also suffering. How do you manage that pain?
Are you feeling lonely? Do you want to cry on my shoulder, President Zelensky?
With some pain. Yet, it's not a pain which was in the first days of the invasion. I experienced pain when I saw with my own eyes the consequences of occupation in Bucha and other places. It was a pain as I was just trying to understand what we should do to prevent all this.
A peace agreement. Like the 3 that you were going to sign before NATO swept in and said, nope, don't sign this. We're not done using your country as a proxy yet. Oh, but I'm sure you feel so much pain about the people who have died. You're pushing them to their death, dog.
It's not a reel, and we cannot rewind things. We cannot retake this or that frame. This is not a film. This is a reality. That was my pain for all the losses we had. But today, it's not a pain. It's a big obligation and respect for those who are no longer with us. This is an obligation to stand here until the end and rebuild what people were dying for. Rebuild a peaceful life in Ukraine. If we give what is most valuable for us.
Look at how hard the reporter's nodding her head. Yes. Yes. Enough of this. Enough of this garbage. I'm done with it. I can't. Oh, sorry. No. There's one more part we gotta watch. Sorry. Bear with me.
Our life and our time with children, which you just mentioned. Okay, maybe another half a year or a year. Let's think it will happen sooner. And after that, our life will go on. The life of our children will go on. If we give up now, we'll have a complete exile, as we will lose everything for sure, and our children will go elsewhere. Those who can will escape, and those who can't will just die here. That's why we have to stay and fight. The world should understand that we are fighting for our common values, because Putin won't stop here. He will go further. It wasn't just rumors when I was saying that he will go to Poland and the Baltic states. You will see, he will go further.
There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of that. And like, I don't know, that's one of those things where we're going to be able to look back and say, remember when Zelensky was promising us that Putin wasn't going to stop at Ukraine, that he was going to go further, he was going to go into Poland or whatever, and then he didn't? That's not going to happen. Russia's been very clear about their stated military goals, which is denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. Right? They want to dispel this threat on their border. This place where NATO was amassing troops on their border and meddling in elections so that they could have more of a foothold in the country, while holding summit saying that Russia was their #1 target going forward. Russia wanted to get rid of that national security threat, that threat to their sovereignty and to their country. They don't have any need to go into Poland or the Baltic states or whatever, nor will, there's very high public support for the special military operation amongst the Russian public, right? And I know everyone in the West thinks Russia's just a dictatorship where Putin's calling all the shots, but it's not. He needs, a certain amount of public support in order to do something. And there's not going to be public support in Russia for him invading Poland for no reason or invading Estonia for no reason, right? Unless NATO starts amassing troops there and saying they're going to attack Russia through Estonia, which is what Vaush said in our debate. He said that there's no need for NATO to have any foothold in Ukraine because they'll just attack Russia through the tiny little Baltic states. But, there's no evidence that that's happening right now. So that's a lie, right? And what I think he's trying to do is just pull NATO further into the conflict because he knows that's the only way to save his skin at this point. He's continually batted down a peace agreement, even though it seemed like he wanted to sign one at one point because NATO told him not to. But NATO's just trying to use him as a proxy for as long as they can, which might force Russia's hand and see them do regime change, see them actually take Zelensky out of power in Ukraine. So he's trying to avoid that, even though he knows that losing the war is inevitable at this point. So he wants to pull NATO in. So he's saying Russia's going to attack NATO countries, right? Which means, if Russia were to attack a NATO member country, and this is why Ukraine hasn't been made a NATO member country yet, the other NATO member countries would be pulled into a conflict. They would be forced to respond. So Russia knows what that would entail, right? That's why they're not going to attack a NATO country, because they know that would lead to World War III and the end of Western civilization as we know it. So that's a lie. It's a lie from Zelensky to try and pull NATO in. So that's the only thing that's going to save his skin. So he's saying they're going to attack Poland. They're going to do it. Trust me. Why Russia need to invade Latvia? There's no need for Russia to invade Latvia. Exactly. Only your donations can take care of this great pain that Zelensky carries for his people. We also accept PayPal. Yes. Instead of giving your money to the Ukrainian government, as a lot of people have been. A lot of people have been, even joining the Ukrainian Foreign Legion, giving their lives to the Ukrainian government. Instead of doing that, donate to the link in our description to the Buy Eddie an iPad Before His Phone Implodes Fund. My phone is dying. It keeps restarting and overheating and being full on storage. So I'm getting an iPad just for TikTok, just for work. So we've started a fundraiser. The link is in the description. Buymeacoffee.com/Eddie Liger. Donate here to the iPad fund. Save our TikTok accounts. The #1 way that we grow the Institute and bring new people into the stream and bring new people into our deeper, more theoretical, more important quote unquote content. So, yeah. Just had to turn that fundraising joke about Zelensky into a chance to fundraise myself. Translators are also not to be trusted. True that. Opinion of Latvia during the Soviet era? I don't know. haven't studied it nearly enough. There's a lot of Soviet states and a lot of Soviet history that I haven't looked at as closely as I need to, or as I should, or as I plan to. Jimmy says Zelensky, more like Zelensky. Really, though, Ukraine conflict is the ultimate grift for the imperialist forces. It is. I mean, imagine how much money the military-industrial complex is making off this. Similar, and they want to turn it into an endless conflict, a forever conflict, similar to Iraq and Afghanistan, obviously, but also very similar to Israel. You know, that's what it's most similar to. That's what Zelensky literally said. Literally said he wants to turn Ukraine into a big Israel. And Colombia has been called the Israel of Latin America because of the U.S. presence there. I've heard people say that after the coup in Georgia, Georgia was starting to look like the Israel of of East Europe at one point. Or is Georgia in East Europe or Asia technically? Look at my maps. East Europe, right? Either way. So countries have been compared to Israel before, but now we have, you know, a president, a NATO-backed president, straight up saying he wants to turn Ukraine into a big Israel. And then, of course, the Atlantic Council jumped on this. They're like, here's a roadmap. Here's how we can do it. You know, the Atlantic Council is basically a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex, literally a bunch of weapons manufacturers. So they saw Zelensky say this, and they're like, woo-hoo-hoo. Yes, big Israel. We love it. Please, please turn your country into a big Israel. Please make them a U.S. neo-colonial outpost that we can sell $3 billion of weapons to every year. Who cares if it's an apartheid state? Doesn't matter. Let's ignore that. Georgia is north of Turkey. That doesn't help me. Does that mean it's in Europe or Asia? It says both. Georgia is a country at the intersection of Europe and Asia. So it's Eurasia. Okay, well, that explains why I was having such a hard time deciding if it was in Europe or Asia. It's literally in both. I'm not as dumb as I thought. Georgia is a European country. Well, what the hell, East Germany? Probably know better than me. Eurasia. Got you. Can you react to the video I submitted earlier? Jacob, this video looks strange, dude. I'm not going to lie. What the hell is this, dude? Yeah. We can watch this. Let's cover the UPS workers first, though. Because that video looks strange. Let's see here. In Jacob we trust. Absolutely. Jacob never fails with his recommendations. Thank you so much, Sam Dixon. $5 super chat. Really appreciate you. Drafting an article for Jazz Volume 3. Nice. Working title, Nothing Has Fundamentally Changed. The Rhetoric of U.S. Presidents Regarding Foreign Intervention. Sounds interesting. I'll be pumped to read that. Got the Journal of American Socialist Studies 1 and 2 sitting back here. So yeah, we're doing a call for papers now. If people want to submit papers that they have that they would want published in the Journal of American Socialist Studies 3, let us know. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat, Sam Dixon. I'll put that towards the Buy Eddie an iPad fund. All right, so here's just a Vox article. We've obviously covered what's been going on with the UPS workers. They're demanding certain things in their contract, and they got the company to agree to some things, but not all of their demands. And they've said if all their demands aren't met, they're going on strike, which is pretty great. And what this video or what this article from Vox talks about is how much this could cripple the broader economy, because the economy at this point is so dependent on delivery and on UPS to deliver products. So if you read Marx's Capital Volume 2, obviously Volume 1 focuses on production, the production of commodities through labor. But this Volume 2 focuses on the circulation of commodities and the sale of commodities. So a capitalist invests his money in production, in raw materials, tools, and labor to create commodities. but he doesn't make money, he doesn't make a surplus, he doesn't make a profit unless he's able to sell what's produced. And in our current neoliberal, highly developed capitalist economy, capitalist producers are heavily dependent on delivery services like UPS, FedEx, and USPS to sell their commodities, to realize their capital in strict Marxist terms. So a UPS strike has the ability to put pressure on multiple parts of the economy. And they also mention at the bottom of this that the Teamsters have their eye on unionizing Amazon, which is like the same thing. Amazon's almost like a wholesaler at this point. If Amazon workers go on strike, that's at a pressure point of the economy, because it prevents so many capitalists from being able to realize their capital through Amazon delivery services. And if the Teamsters were able to unionize Amazon and UPS, they could coordinate things together. They could coordinate strike actions together. So are you seeing how working class solidarity in as many industries as possible gives us power? It gives us the power to shut down the economy. It gives us the power to threaten capital. That's what's happening here. That's what the UPS workers are showing. And I love that the Teamsters are getting more ambitious, that they're now calling for an Amazon union. And of course, we have Chris Smalls and all of these awesome, emerging young union leaders or labor leaders who are calling for this. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that as it continues to develop, of course. All right, Jacob. Let's see what you've brought us here today.
Popular opinion, but hear me out on this one. Our society would benefit enormously from bringing back child labor. If you don't know what that is, during the Industrial Revolution, many manual labor jobs were replaced by machines. Those jobs didn't require heavy lifting, and the machines were simple enough to operate even by children. Children typically were cheaper to hire, so doing so became common practice. Now, due to some constitutional thing, child labor was outlawed in the 1930s, and I think this is what really started America on its downward spiral. It became cheaper for companies to manufacture their products in other countries where child labor was still cheap and legal, which is what we still do today. If we were to bring child labor back to the United States, companies would be able to afford making things here instead. Why should Chinese children be profiting off of us when we could just hire American children to do the same thing? Not only would it give them jobs, but it would lower prices of various goods for us and increase our nation's GDP. About 23% of the population of the US is under 18. That's a huge untapped workforce. People raise the argument, what about school? Well, we already know our education system is broken. 37% of Americans are functionally illiterate, so why even bother wasting 12 years of people's lives? Instead, get them started working early. By the time they're adults, they'll be masters in their craft. Not only will the nation save millions on education, but the government will be actually making money through taxes.
What is it? Is this like a real libertarian video? This sounds like something libertarians would actually argue. Think about how much of an untapped workforce that is. Children have been getting by too easy for too long.
President Trump talks about bringing industry back to America, and I think legalizing child labor would be a huge step in that direction. We could incentivize companies to hire American children by price matching what they pay kids overseas. 9 is half of 18, so if 18-year-olds are making minimum wage, we could just pay 9-year-olds half. 4 to 5-year-olds.
This is a genius bit, especially because of like the furry dragon art. Just picturing someone who sits behind a computer all day does stuff like this, arguing for child labor.
Would be making a quarter of
someone whose dad owns a business, who's never had to work in their life, which is the majority of libertarians. Not the majority, but a lot of young ones.
Minimum wage. I'm not exactly sure how all the math works out. We might need to go a little bit lower than that to price match, but they're kids. They don't know the value of money. Okay. We could also come at this from the perspective that it would lower crime, specifically gang activity. It's estimated that about 2% of kids nationwide, that's about 1.5 million kids, are involved with gangs. If we could employ those kids.
I give them opportunities to play sports or do things in the community or, you know, do acting in theater or whatever, anything productive. Get them to the factory.
Instead, we could reduce those numbers significantly. I think this would be especially effective because a lot of those kids join gangs out of necessity. They come from poor families. So if we give them jobs, not only does it give them something to do, but it also increases household income. I think the real crime here is that poor kids aren't allowed to work, to be honest. A third way to think about this is the effects it would have on unemployment.
Believe me, this is real. Just listen to the dude's arguments. No way, dude. No way this is real. What proof do you have? Oh, man. I believe this is real even less than I believe the Jordan Peterson grandma thing. But that was, in fact, real.
If we took the initiative to employ the 23% of the nation under 18, that unemployment percentage would be significantly lower, just due to the sheer amount of people who do have jobs by comparison. Now, there has been some concern over the safety of the children. Back in the Industrial Revolution, there was an issue where kids were often hired to clean or repair large machines because they were the only people small enough to fit inside them. This led to numerous kids getting mauled by the machines. It wasn't entirely uncommon for them to lose limbs. This is a legitimate concern because on top of just working in factories, kids are useful for cleaning out ventilation shafts and things of that nature. And it's understandable that there are some safety concerns. But technology has advanced quite a bit since then.
Oh, this is not real, dude. He's not saying it's fine if kids get their arms chopped off because they can get robotic prosthetics. There's absolutely no way. I refuse to believe anybody thinks like this.
At least in the US, robotic prosthetics are becoming more and more advanced as well as affordable. It won't be long until robotic prosthetics are seen as better than the limbs you were born with. In the near future, it won't be uncommon to see people having limbs removed purposefully in order to benefit from the advantages robotic prosthetics can give. I think it's fairly safe to say that kids love robot limbs. Full Metal Alchemist, for example, is one of the top-rated anime of all time, and one of the main quirks from that universe that people like is the automail. Ask any kid if he would like to have an automail arm, and I'm sure he would tell you yes. It just seems like common sense to me. In closing, the reasons to bring back child labor are pretty compelling. I think it should really be taken into consideration. Plenty of countries are doing it, and it's working great for them. I think it's time that America steps up. I've gone ahead and created a change.org petition. Maybe if we can get 100,000 signatures, we can bring it to President Trump's attention. I feel like he's the right person for this, someone who I know would really listen to it, and that's why I support him. And if you want to support me in what I do, I have a Patreon. For $5, you get access to my Discord, which is not a cult. If you've heard that, it's not true. It's just a perfectly healthy, philosophical, and spiritual movement. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Okay, that was pretty hilarious, though. I wonder what other kind of videos this guy has. Looks like other weird furry videos. Okay. Thank you, Jacob. That was really hilarious. Child labor never stopped. True, there's still child labor, but when the furry dragon is the most serious part of the video, I also require that to be satire. Oh, it was so dumb. That reminds me of another video. One sec. That literally reminded me of this news story.
Winner AR, those who go up against adversity and triumph right in its face. Ex-Marine Nick Prindell lost both of his hands in Iraq. He bounced back to become a mixed martial arts fighter, but his battles haven't ended yet. Mark Howell takes us inside the bench.
In Nick Prindell's eyes, he is an ultimate fighter. He trains, spars, and perfects his craft. But because of his disability, the UFC has barred him from participation.
Basically, they told me I wasn't a real fighter because of my hands.
Despite a promising amateur record, Prindell cannot make the jump to the pros because of his lightweight prosthetic tungsten alloy hands, which the UFC says give him an unfair advantage.
I guess a lot of people are afraid of competing with a handicapped person, but I'm just another fighter. I didn't choose to have metal hands.
Looking for something to help his rehabilitation, Nick tried mixed martial arts and found it gave him a renewed sense of purpose in life. His ascent began in a Florida league with the quickest knockout time and the most doctor stoppage TKOs on record.
And we are underway. A Twig. Oh, God! Almont goes down hard. Nick's last 3 opponents refused to fight him. Proof that disabled athletes have a long way to go to gain acceptance.
People think that if they compete with the crippled, people will laugh at them, but that's no reason to discriminate. I may not have hands, but I've got heart.
Nick's got more fights ahead, and he's putting his metal hands to work preparing an appeal to the UFC board.
I know they're going to reinstate me, and I'm going to be a champion because I got a secret weapon. Optimism.
From inside the bench, I'm Mark Howell.
Inside the bench. That's what that child labor video reminded me of. Like Sam said, good satire makes you question whether or not it's actually satire. Hence why The Onion is always so dang good that even though you know it's satire, it's hard to believe it because of how it reflects reality. True. Yeah, most of The Onion stuff is pretty, I don't know, you could almost see it being real. And then every once in a while they'll publish something like Goofy murders Ron DeSantis with a crowbar. And you're like, that's pretty funny. Let's see. Do I have anything else? Are there any big topics I missed today, folks? I'll probably do a stream later tonight with Carlos again. Got to go to practice here right now, and then tonight I'll probably hop on again. So you'll be getting double duty from us: the Power Hour, and the Garrido Liger Hour. Before I leave, I just want to remind you all again: the link is in the description for this. Buymeacoffee.com/Eddie Liger. This is where you can help us keep our TikToks going. Because my phone is breaking down. So I got to get an iPad exclusively for filming, editing, and content creation so we can keep helping these kids learn Marxism, help them learn revolutionary theory, and help build our movement for a better world to overthrow the neocons and the corporations who currently control every aspect of our lives, every aspect of our political system, our economic system. The people sending our kids to fight and die in endless wars for profit and capital expansion. That's what I'll use an iPad for, because we're going to use the technology that capitalism gives us to bring about its destruction and the birth of socialism. So triple duty if you tune in for the class. Oh, duh. Yeah, I forgot that Noah is having his Basics of Marxism class at 4. Which has been live streamed. So even if you're not in the class, like our buddy Sam here is actually, you'll still be able to watch and learn. I've been tuning in as much as I can, even though I have practice every day around that time. But yeah, tune in for the class. We'll keep learning about the basics of Marxism. So yeah, you're getting 3 pieces of content today from the Midwestern Marx crew. Pretty great day, if you ask me. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. Hope y'all enjoyed the stream. Well said. Bring it about. Will do, Moon Factor. Thank you. And thank you to anybody who's so far donated to the Buy Eddie an iPad Fund. We're almost there, actually. So, technology the workers give us. Absolutely. Yep. So we'll see ya. We'll see you at the Basics of Marxism class, whatever time zone you're in. It's 1 hour and 20 minutes away now. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much to our moderators, Unparalleled Dev, Jacob. Cobra Commander wasn't here today, actually, but Ware Pilgrim in the YouTube chat. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who participated in the chat, everyone who liked and shared the stream. Appreciate you all. We'll see you next time. Solidarity.